All right, guys. So it's going to be also a little long. We're still on first chapter, Free to Choose. Milton Friedman, The Power of the Market. That's chapter one. This one is the role of government. It's going to be a little long because I always stop and try to. My brain isn't that swift at computing information. I'm more of a rote learner, which is repeating something in order to remember it. Rote learning, ROTE. So the role of government. Where does government enter into the picture? To some extent, government is a form of voluntary cooperation, a way in which people choose to achieve some of their objectives through governmental entities. A way in which people choose to achieve some of their objectives through governmental entities because they believe that it is the most effective means of achieving them. The clearest example is local government under conditions where people are free to choose where to live. You may decide to live in one community rather than another, partly on the basis of the kind of services its government offers. Okay, that makes sense. Local government. You may decide to live in one community rather than another, partly on the basis of the kind of services its government offers, like maybe like a more healthier community to live in. It's if it engages in activities you object to or are unwilling to pay for, and these more than balance the activities you favor and are willing to pay for, you can vote with your feet by moving elsewhere. There is competition, limited but real, so long as there are available alternatives. But government is more than that. There's also the agency that is widely regarded as having a monopoly on the legitimate use of force or the threat of force as the means through which some of us can legitimately impose restraints through force upon others of us. The role of government in that more basic sense has changed drastically over time in most societies and has differed widely among societies at any given time. I sense a little so he's more of a neoclassical economist, I would say. He really doesn't. We'd rather probably not have government. Much of the rest of this book deals with how its role has changed in the United States in recent decades and what the effects of its activities have been. In this initial sketch, we want to consider a very different question. In a society whose participants desire in a society whose participants desire to achieve the greatest possible freedom to choose as individuals, participants desire to achieve the greatest possible freedom to choose as individuals, as families, as members of voluntary groups, as citizens of an organized government. What role should be assigned to government? He's asking. It is not easy to improve on the answer that Adam Smith gave to this question 200 years ago. So he's saying Adam Smith covered all angles. He's saying, what role should be assigned to government? I want to highlight that so somebody coming across my library in the future and look at some of these marked points and realize what it's kind of like a little bookmark for them, an index. It is not easy to improve on the answer that Adam Smith gave to this question 200 years ago. So he's gonna use Adam Smith's words. I say Karl Marx, the antithesis of Karl Marx. It's actually his book. Is actually his writing is totally opposite. They probably wouldn't get along in a room. All systems either of preference or of restraint, therefore, being thus completely taken away, the obvious and simple system of natural liberty established itself of its own accord. Humans' nature to want to be free is just happens naturally. Every man, as long as he does not violate the laws of justice, is left perfectly free to pursue his own interests in his own way, and to bring both his industry and capital into competition with those of any other man or order of men. The sovereign is completely discharged from a duty. It's like that's not the government should just wipe that off of one of their ideas of what they have to control. That's not on their list of duties. So the sovereign is completely discharged from a duty, in the attempting to perform which he must always be exposed to innumerable delusions. So he's free of that. in attempting to perform which he must always be exposed to innumerable delusions, and for the proper performance of which no wisdom, and for the proper performance of which no human wisdom or knowledge could ever be sufficient. The duty of superintending the industry of private people and of directing it towards the employments most suitable to the interests of the society, according to the system of natural liberty, the system of natural liberty, according to it, according to the system of natural liberty. The sovereign has only three duties to attend to, three great duties of importance. So this is like political philosophy right here. Indeed, but plain and intelligible to common understandings. So plain in simple words and also understandable, intelligible to common understandings. First, the duty of protecting the society from the violence and invasion of other independent societies. The duty to protecting the society from the violence and invasion of other independent societies. Secondly, so according to the system of natural liberty, only three duties. First, and secondly, so to protect its citizens from other people trying to commit violence to them. So the three duties. So the sovereign, he's saying the people in control. Sovereign being, because back then there was monarchies, right? Goes back to Locke. I think John Locke. Yeah, John Locke, who is a very big influence on people who wrote our Constitution and the Articles of Confederation. No, the Articles. What is it called? Federalist Papers. Excuse me, the Federalist Papers, which is pretty much like the explanation of the justification information provided to us on why it's like a more in-depth Declaration of Independence, a more in-depth Constitution. So this is the three duties of the sovereign. Three duties of sovereign. Three duties of sovereign. Economics, philosophy, history. Education is an aggregate to human nature, human mind. Secondly, the duty of protecting as far as possible every member of the society from the injustice or oppression of every other member of it, or the duty of establishing an exact administration of justice. So the first one was protecting it from outside forces. The second one is protecting us from domestic injustices and establishing an exact administration of justice, laws, government. And thirdly, the duty of erecting and maintaining certain public works and certain public institutions, which can never be for the interest of any individual or small number of individuals to erect and maintain, because the profit can never repay the expense to any individual or small number of individuals, though it may frequently do much more than repay it to a great society. The third one I'm having a little struggle with. So, duty of erecting and maintaining certain public works and certain public institutions. There is a little number three. Or number three, let's see what he says for the first chapter. Okay, he's just giving us where he got that from. So the Wealth of Nations, Volume 2. Yeah, okay. Okay, so now we're done. That was Adam Smith's words right there, giving us the three duties of the sovereign according to the system of natural liberty. So, to protect people from their self-interest, protect people who have the motivation to acquire things. It's very interesting. The first two duties are clear and straightforward. The protection of individuals in the society from coercion whether it comes from outside or from their fellow citizens. The first two duties, the protection of individual society from the coercion, whether it comes from outside. Unless there is such protection, we are not really free to choose. The armed robbers, your money or your life, in quotes, offers me a choice. But no one would describe it as a free choice or the subsequent exchange as voluntary. Because you're being coerced, like you're being intimidated to do something. Of course, as we shall see repeatedly throughout this book, it is one thing to state the purpose that an institution, particularly a governmental institution, ought to serve. It is quite another to describe the purposes the institution actually serves. The intentions of the persons responsible for setting up the institution and of the persons who operate it often differ sharply. Equally important, the results achieved often differ widely from those intended. Military and police forces are required to prevent coercion from without and within. They do not always succeed, and the power they possess is sometimes used for very different purposes. A major problem in achieving and preserving a free society is precisely how to assure that coercive powers granted to government in order to preserve freedom are limited to that function and are kept from becoming a threat to freedom. A major problem in achieving and preserving a free society is precisely how to assure that coercive powers granted to government in order to preserve freedom are limited to that function and are kept from becoming a threat to freedom. The founders of our country wrestled with that problem in drawing up the Constitution. We have tended to neglect it. Adam Smith's second duty goes beyond the narrow police function of protecting people from physical coercion. It includes an exact administration of justice. No voluntary exchange that is at all complicated or extends over any considerable period of time can be free from ambiguity. No voluntary exchange that is at all complicated or extends over any considerable period of time can be free. So sometimes, people agree, like, taking forever to pay me back, or there needs to be some sort of mediator, some sort of Levitical system. No voluntary exchange that is at all complicated. So the an exact administration of justice. They're saying sometimes these voluntary exchanges are more complicated than just say yes and no's, or extends over any considerable period of time can be free from ambiguity. There is not enough fine print in the world to specify in advance every contingency that might arise and to describe precisely the obligations of the various parties to the exchange in each case. There must be some way to mediate disputes. Such mediation itself can be voluntary and need not involve government. In the United States today, most disagreements they arise in connection with commercial contracts are settled by resort to private arbitrators chosen by a procedure specified in advance. In response to this demand, an extensive private judicial system has grown up. But the court of last resort is provided by the governmental judicial system. The courts are the judicial system, the Supreme Court, the judges. This role of government also includes facilitating voluntary exchanges by adopting general rules, the rules of economic and social game that the citizens of a free society play. The rules of an economic and social game. And they say amidst the game. The most obvious example is the meaning to be attached to private property. I own a house. Are you trespassing on my private property if you fly your private airplane 10 feet over my roof? 1,000 feet? 30,000 feet? There was nothing natural about where my property rights end and yours begin. Like, natural in a sense, like, easily understood. Like, it's not axiomatic. It's not unquestionable. The major way that society has come to agree on the rules of property is through the growth of common law, trial and error, though more recently legislation has played an increasing role. Adam Smith's third duty raises the most troublesome issues. He himself regarded it as having a narrow application. It has since been used to justify an extremely wide range of government activities. In our view, it describes a valid duty of a government directed to preserving and strengthening a free society. But it can also be interpreted to justify unlimited extensions of government power. So I think the rule number 3 was talking about setting up schools and like actual public things for the public, certain powers that the state has to become to make it to nationalize, I guess. The valid element arises because of the cost of producing some goods or services through strictly voluntary exchanges. Through strictly voluntary exchanges. To take one simple example suggested directly by Smith's description of the third duty, city streets and general access highways could be provided by private voluntary exchange, the cost being paid for by charging tolls. But the cost of collecting the tolls would often be very large compared to the cost of building and maintaining the streets or highways. This is a public work that it might not be for the interest of any individual to erect and maintain, though it might be worthwhile for a great society. But the cost of collecting the tolls would often be very large compared to the cost of building and maintaining the streets or highways. So we all have to pay for it. It's just like, it's all agreed, okay? It's part of our taxes. Because it's for one individual to pay for it, it's just too expensive, he's saying. Might be worthwhile for a great society. It's still a little abstract for me. A more subtle example involves effects on third parties, people who are not parties to the particular exchange. A more subtle example involves effects on third parties. Effects on third parties. People who are not parties to the particular exchange. The classic smoke nuisance case. Your furnace pours forth sooty smoke that dirties a third party's shirt collar. You have unintentionally imposed costs on a third party. Your furnace pours forth sooty smoke that dirties a third party's shirt collar. You have intentionally imposed costs on a third party. He would be willing to let you dirty his collar for a price, but it is simply not feasible for you to identify all of the people whom you affect, or for them to discover who has dirtied their collars and to require you to indemnify them individually or reach individual agreements with them. The effect of your actions on third parties may be to confer benefits rather than impose costs. The effect of your actions on third parties may be to confer benefits rather than impose costs. You landscape your house beautifully and all passerbys enjoy the sight. They would be willing to pay something for the privilege, but it is not feasible to charge them for looking at your lovely flowers. To lapse into technical jargon, there is a market failure because of external or neighborhood effects for which it is not feasible, i.e., would cost too much, to compensate or charge the people affected. Third parties have had involuntary exchanges imposed on them. Almost everything we do has some third-party effects, however small and however remote. In consequence, Adam Smith's third duty may at first blush appear to justify almost any proposed government measure. Adam Smith's third duty may at first blush appear to justify almost any proposed government measure, but there was a fallacy. So Adam Smith's third duty may first blush to appear to justify almost any proposed government measure. Like, it may be granting government justification for whatever they want to do. But there was a fallacy. Government measures also have third-party effects. Government failure, no less than market failure, arise from external or neighborhood effects. Government failure. Then what do we have here? But another failure, right? Market failure. So government failure, no less than market failure, arises from external or neighborhood effects. And if such effects are important for a market transaction, they are likely also to be important for government measures intended to correct the market failure. The primary source of significant third-party effects of private actions is the difficulty of identifying the external costs or benefits. The primary source of significant third-party effects of private actions is difficulty of identifying external costs. So we just say we all come to an agreement that, hey, we're all gonna decide to keep this road. We all own this road, and how we do that is it comes out of our taxes, which is an argument for people who don't pay taxes. Like, why should it be their road? You know. When it is easy to identify who is hurt or who is benefited, and by how much, it is fairly straightforward to replace involuntary by voluntary exchange. So there we go. It's coming together now, right? Or at least to require individual compensation. So this is pretty much the struggle. This is right here. This is the anecdotal definition, or semi-anecdotal. When it is easy to identify who is hurt or who is benefited, and by how much, it is fairly straightforward to replace involuntary by voluntary exchange, or at least to require individual compensation. That's where we're all forced to pay taxes. This is this is like taxes. This is the justification for taxes in a nutshell right here. The third party effects. If your car hits someone else's because of your negligence, you can be made to pay them for damages even though the exchange was involuntary. If it were easy to know whose collars were going to be dirtied, it would be possible for you to compensate the people affected, or alternatively, for them to pay you to pour out less smoke. It is difficult for private parties to identify who imposes costs or benefits on whom. It is difficult for government to do so. As a result, a government attempt to rectify the situation may very well end up making matters worse rather than better. Imposing costs on innocent third parties or conferring benefits on lucky bystanders. To finance its activities, it must collect taxes, which themselves affect what the taxpayers do, still another third party effect. In addition, every accretion of government power for whatever purpose increases the danger that government, instead of serving the great majority of its citizens, will become a means whereby some of its citizens can take advantage of others. Every government measure bears, as it were, the smokestack on its back. Voluntary arrangements can allow for third-party effects to a much greater extent than may at first appear. To take a trivial example, tipping at restaurants is a social custom that leads you to assure better service for people you may not know or ever meet, and in return be assured better service by the actions of still another group of anonymous third parties. Nonetheless, third-party effects of private actions do occur that are sufficiently important to justify government action. The lesson to be drawn from the misuse of Smith's third duty is not that government intervention is never justified, but rather that the burden of proof should be on its proponents. We should develop the practice of examining both the benefits and the costs of proposed government interventions, and require a very clear balance of benefits over costs before adopting them. This course of action is recommended, so require a very clear balance of benefits over costs before adopting them. Like where's our tax money going? Look at the roads are fucking shitty. That's what he's saying. This course of action is recommended not only by the difficulty of assessing the hidden costs of government intervention, but also by another consideration. The hidden costs of government intervention. Experience shows that once government undertakes an activity, it is seldom terminated. Like once they get involved, they don't like to relinquish that power anymore. The activity may not live up to expectation, but that is more likely to lead to its expansion. The activity may not live up, so what the government does may not lead up or may not live up to what we expected, but that is more likely to lead to its expansion, to its being granted a larger budget, than to its curtailment or abolishment. A fourth duty of government that Adam Smith did not explicitly mention is the duty to protect members of the community who cannot be regarded as responsible individuals. Like Adam Smith's third duty, this one too is susceptible of great abuse, yet it cannot be avoided. A fourth duty, to protect those who aren't as ambitious as other people, aren't as industrious. Like Adam Smith's third duty, this one too is susceptible to great abuse, yet it cannot be avoided. Freedom is a tenable objective. Like it's obtainable only for responsible individuals. We do not believe in freedom for madmen or children. Oh, I like that. We do not believe in freedom for madmen or children. We must somehow draw a line between responsible individuals and others, yet doing so introduces a fundamental ambiguity. So it gives them the power to say who's a madman and who's not, into our ultimate objective of freedom. Yet doing so introduces a fundamental ambiguity into our ultimate objective of freedom. We cannot categorically reject paternalism for those who we consider as not responsible. What is paternalism? Should look that up, right? We cannot categorically reject paternalism for those whom we consider as not responsible. I think he's still talking about the madmen, the adults, not the children. Like we cannot like their autonomy. We can't reject. Maybe we can't reject their autonomy. Define paternalism. Paternalism. The practice of interfering with a person's freedom or will for their own good. We cannot categorically reject paternalism for those who we consider as not responsible. We cannot categorically reject. So we can't like stop the government from using paternalism. The policy or practice on the part of the people in positions of authority of restricting the freedom and responsibilities of those subordinate to them. So he's saying we cannot categorically reject. Well, we need a process to decipher who is and who is not responsible. So he's kind of saying like we cannot stop the government, or is he saying can we not stop the government from doing so? For children, we assign responsibility in the first instance to parents. The family, rather than the individual, has always been and remains today the basic building block of our society. The family, rather than the individual, has always been and remains today the basic building block of our society. Though its hold has clearly been weakening. Ooh, I like this right here. So he sounds like a reasonable man right here. One of the most unfortunate consequences of the growth of government paternalism. So he's saying we can't agree with. Then he's also like putting the blame on them for the paternal. So by definition, paternalism, the policy or practice on the part of the people in positions of authority of restricting the freedom and responsibilities of those subordinate to them in the subordinate's supposed best interests. The family rather than the individual. I'm trying to rush because I'm trying to meet a timeline, but I don't really want to rush. I have about 2 more paragraphs. The family rather than the individual has always been and remains today the basic building block of our society, though its hold has clearly been weakening. One of the most unfortunate consequences of the growth of government paternalism. So I'm assuming he's saying instead of actually helping them, we take away from them. We don't try to like bring them to responsible human. We just stop them. We don't focus on the family. We focus on an individual, whether he is healthy or not already, hot and ready. Like we live in a microwave society. We want you hot and ready. We don't care about fixing you or changing you. Yet the assignment of responsibility for children to their parents is largely a matter of expediency rather than principle. I think he's proving my point. We believe, and with good reason, that parents have more interest in their children than anyone else and can be relied on to protect them and to assure their development into responsible adults. However, we do not believe in the right of parents to do whatever they will with their children, to beat them, murder them, or sell them into slavery. Children are responsible individuals in embryo. They have ultimate rights of their own and are not simply the playthings of their parents. Adam Smith's three duties, or our four duties of government, so Adam Smith had three, we have four, are indeed of great importance, but they are far less plain and intelligible to common understandings than he supposed. Though we cannot decide the desirability or undesirability of any actual or proposed government intervention by mechanical reference to one or another of them. They provide a set of principles that we can use in casting up a balance sheet of pros and cons. Even on the loosest interpretation, they rule out much existing government intervention. All those systems, either of preference or of restraint, that Adam Smith fought against, that were subsequently destroyed but have since reappeared in the forms of today's tariffs, governmentally fixed prices and wages, restrictions on entry into various occupations, and numerous other departures from his simple system of natural liberty. Many of these are discussed in later chapters. So we have that third of that was pretty important. The I'm gonna forget. The effect, the third effect. What was it called? The effect. The third party effect. Yeah, third party effects. Third party effects. So I gotta write that down. Third party effects. Very important. Very important idea that you don't necessarily think of unless you read, pretty much. Peace.